Salutations, everybody! It's your boy Alex Bucky 142, and today we are about to embark on a journey of a galaxy far, far away. Well, not too far, because it's our own galaxy, but just set 12,000 years in the future. This is the Dune series, and today I've decided how to tackle a tier list of Dune. Now, just to begin, I'm going to assume that you have read these books or don't mind being spoiled on them. So, if you haven't read them and you don't want to be spoiled, then please turn this video off and go find something else and read the books. They're very well worth your time, and I highly recommend them. Secondly, I'm not going to be doing Hunters of Dune and Sandlers of Dune. I haven't read those, and to be honest, I don't really consider them to be canon, as I think most Frank Herbert fans would agree with me on. So that being said, I will not be reviewing those two books, but they're on this list here because I just found this snazzy tier list online, and that's what I'm working with. That being said, let's get this party started. First stop is Dune. This is the OG, this is the original, and there is no doubt that Dune is an S-tier book in every sense of the word. There's no other way to put it. Dune is a must-read classic, even for people who aren't into science fiction, who aren't really into political books. Dune is must-read fiction. It's up there with the best books ever written. Yeah, I think it speaks for itself. I don't have to explain this one too much. Dune is just S tier. I recommend that anybody with a pulse should read Dune at least once in their life. It's one of those books that has the capacity to really change you. And so I recommend that anybody who hasn't read Dune read it. If you've read it already, reread it. There's so many facets of it that I think are important for human nature and the understanding of what truly charismatic leaders can do to a society that's ready for war. So I'm not going to explain too much more on this one. Dune is must-read fiction. Please read it. Just stop right now, buy it on Amazon for $10. I'm sure you can get it. I'm sure you can find it for free somewhere. Just read it. Just read it if you haven't. Yeah, just do it. Okay. Now we're going to get into the more controversial ones here. First up is Dune Messiah. Now, I put Dune Messiah also on the S tier list because I don't think that Dune really works without Dune Messiah. Dune is basically a slice of pizza that doesn't have a crust on it. Yeah, you can still eat the pizza. Granted, the pizza's going to be really good. It's full of cheese, pepperoni, tomato sauce. But you really want the crust. Especially a nice crust, have that stuffed with cheese. You know what I'm talking about? You want something like that. Something that's really nice and just full of spices. It just sort of completes the package. And granted, you can eat a crust as a breadstick without the pizza. But it's just not as good. You want them both combined. And Dune Messiah is the nice, cheesy bread, stuffed crust of Dune. Dune really needs Dune Messiah to work, and Dune Messiah needs Dune to work. Dune Messiah is the epilogue of Dune. Without Dune Messiah, Dune makes less sense. Because Dune sort of ends on a rah-rah note. Yeah, we've taken down the Emperor. We're now going to make things better. Dune Messiah shows that things aren't better and that Paul Atreides is actually a really horrible person. It's not his fault. He's sort of locked into it just based on prophecy. But Dune Messiah really shows the problem of a charismatic leader who now has an army willing to sterilize whole planets and genocide entire religions. 60 billion people have died according to Dune Messiah. Heck, it's probably more. Stilgar favorably compares Adolf Hitler to Paul Atreides. That's the type of person we're dealing with. He's not some hero messiah. Well, he is the messiah. He's just a dark messiah. Frank Herbert wrote Dune as a treatise against the leaders. He was alive during Nixon and all the charismatic leaders of that time and Hitler and all that, showing the dangers of what happens when you put too much trust into one person. And Dune Messiah really puts that in the forefront. The ending is super poignant. It ends with Paul Atreides, the Emperor of the Universe, willingly going into the desert. He's too weak to embark on the Golden Path, but he's too strong to die. So he just goes into the desert, fulfilling the Fremen prophecy, and thus ensuring the support of the Atreides line amongst the Fremen. Dune Messiah is S tier because Dune doesn't make sense without it. Anyone who likes Dune, I think, should read Dune Messiah. It's not a really long read. It's really short. It's basically a third of Dune's size. It's maybe 60 to 80,000 words at most. So if you have a spare weekend, you pick it up. You could probably read it in about a day or two. So Dune Messiah is S tier because Dune really doesn't make sense without it. And the two books basically need each other to make sense. Third up is Children of Dune. Now, just as a bit of a warning, after Dune Messiah, I think your mileage with Dune starts to vary. Most casual readers of science fiction and books are perfectly fine to stop at Dune. I recommend that you should read a Dune Messiah if you like Dune, just because it's the epilogue. Dune doesn't make sense without it. But afterwards, your mileage really starts to vary. And Children of Dune is when the quality starts dipping up from S tier and A tier. Children of Dune is a great book, and I think if you enjoyed the first two, you'll find a lot to like here. Now, Dune Messiah isn't really an action-heavy book, whereas Children of Dune apes Dune in all the right ways. It's very philosophically minded, but it's also full of action, especially the last chapters, very intense. And if you want to finish out the story of Paul Atreides, I highly recommend that you read Children of Dune. Frank Herbert effectively made the Dune series, especially House Atreides, into a Greek tragedy, and Dune Children of Dune is a Greek tragedy because the Atreides family basically gets wiped out. Paul's dead, Aaliyah's dead, Jessica has to suffer now because she's a horrible parent. The curse of Agamemnon is still alive in the Atreides line. And Children of Dune is sort of a tragedy in that sense. Is it... Children of Dune is good as Dune? No, it's not. It's very... I remember reading it. It's very long. I feel like Frank Herbert could have chopped half the book out and it would have flowed a lot better. There's a whole lot of chapters of visions and a drug-fueled esoteric moments that didn't work for me. Frank Herbert was a journalist by trade. He's not the most a descriptive writer. He's basically the anti-Tolkien. So when he goes into longer, more esoteric scenes, it starts to really fall apart for me. The pace starts slogging in a bit. Now, the original Dune was super snappy. It was super exciting. There was a lot of action. Children of Dune kind of slogs, especially towards the middle, where it just really sort of stops and slows down. I feel like there's a lot of wasted scenes here. Now, the last chapters are really fast-paced. They're really exciting. A lot of stuff happens at once. Basically, Frank Herbert spends the whole book building up to it. And then it sort of just all explodes at once, and those are the best parts of the book. Now, Children of Dune, you don't have to read it. I wouldn't recommend it as must-read sci-fi. But Children of Dune is pretty good. And if you enjoyed the first two Dune books, I think you will enjoy Children of Dune. Now let's go on to the most controversial book in the Dune series, God Emperor of Dune. Okay, so I find God Emperor of Dune nearly impossible to rank. Fans are equally divided on whether God Emperor of Dune is S tier or if it's basically toilet D tier. I liked it for what it was, but I wouldn't call it S tier. It's not trash. It's not gold either. I'll put this in A tier. It could also be C tier for me. I'll put it in B tier just to equalize it. I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, I know. I'm sorry. But God Emperor of Dune is a Socratic dialogue masquerading as a book. It's a dialogue between Hobbes Leviathan and his subjects without any real action in it. There really isn't any action. If you're to summarize the whole book on Wikipedia, it's Leto Atreides having a bunch of dialogues, then he dies at the end. There really isn't any action here. It's all philosophy. If you love philosophy, you're going to think that this is S tier. There's hardly any action. It's very slow paced. It's a very slow burn, and the dialogue, which is really good, by the way, carries the book. If you were a fan of the original Dune's action, you're going to hate this book. If you don't like philosophy, you're going to want to throw this book away halfway through. And I wouldn't blame you if you did, because there are whole sections of this book that are so slow. This is some of Frank Herbert's best writing, though. It's really, really elegantly written. There's a lot of humor here that I wasn't expecting to find. There's a lot of really funny jokes and a lot of funny slang here that I wasn't expecting, but that I found really, really fun. But if you don't like philosophy, then stop at God Emperor of Dune. You're fine. Stop at Children of Dune. God Emperor of Dune is where the series starts to really shift. And if you don't like this, then you're not going to like the other two books. But God Emperor of Dune for me is either A tier or C tier. I'm just putting it in B tier just to keep it there. Sort of depends on my mood. I liked it for what it was worth, but I don't have a desire to really reread it. It's dense. It takes a lot of time to dig through. And it's not something that's really casual reading for me. Next up is Heretics of Dune. This is when the series starts to jump the shark. I don't know what drugs Frank Herbert was on when he wrote these last two books, but they just get really, really weird. And I don't think the writing is all that impressive either. I'm putting Heretics in C tier. It just gets weird, guys. Weird in that a 12-year-old kid becomes reawakened after someone grabs his penis and starts jerking it off, basically. Weird. Weird in that there's a whole society of people who basically rely on gaining power by getting men sexually addicted to them. There's a whole just a grotesque sex scenes here. I think Frank Herbert was getting off on this, honestly. It just gets weird, man. It's, I found this book is like God Emperor. The whole middle is just a boring slog where nothing happens. And then the last chapters are just full of exciting action and then just ends. I'm just not even going to describe this much more. It's C tier. If you really love Dune, read this. But if you don't, then stop at Children or stop at God Emperor. All the characters that you liked are dead. Paul is dead. Aaliyah's dead, Stilgar's dead, Chani's dead, Jessica's dead, Leto 2 Atreides is dead, Mineo's dead. They're all dead. These are new cast of characters, and while I found the Bene Gesserit's characters here, especially Hammurabi, to be very, very compelling, I thought their scenes just dragged on sometimes. I understand what's going on in the galaxy, and I like the sort of build-up with the scattering, but I thought that Heretics of Dune was just a slog. I remember falling asleep more than a few times reading this book. It just wasn't my thing, really. C tier, it's not bad writing, but it's not nearly as good as the other books. C tier. Chapter House. Our Dune Chapter House also gets C tier. I would give it D tier, but I can't put a Dune book in D tier because it's such a good series. Chapter House to me suffers a lot of the same problems that Heretics of Dune suffers, in that it slogs. There's a lot of unneeded over-sexualization, and it just gets too weird. A lot of the cool action happens off, or our typical Frank Herbert style. A lot of the best action happens off page, so you just get the sort of reaction to it. I'm not going to go too much into this. My problems with Heretics of Dune carry over to Chapter House. It's long, boring. The last chapters are exciting in typical Frank Herbert style, but it just really doesn't come together as well as the other Dune books do. So for that, I'm going to give it C tier. Alright, so overall, this is the Dune series here. We have 2 books in S tier that are must read for anybody, I think. We have an A tier, we have a faux B tier, and the 2 C tiers. The Dune series to me starts off fantastic. Then your mileage really starts to vary as you go down into the weeds of the other books. If you really love science fiction, or if you really just love good books, then read Dune. If you love Dune, then you're gonna like Dune. Then you're gonna like Dune Messiah. That's also a must-read epilogue book. Now, after those 2, your mileage will vary. Children of Dune, I recommend reading just to cap off Paul Atreides' story. A God Emperor. This is when I think the Dune series starts to not become. I would tell people, unless you're a super Dune fan, just don't bother. Now, God Emperor is a very interesting book, so if you love philosophy, if you really want to see how Hobbes Leviathan would handle this, then I recommend that you pick up and read God Emperor of Dune, and you might find it more exciting than I did. And the last 2 books, unless you're a Dune super fanatic, or if you're like me and you have OCD and you just have to finish the damn series, then I don't recommend that you read those 2. Your mileage is really going to vary. They're slogs, they're really long, they're not very exciting. You'll have fun with them if you like Dune, but if not, then just don't bother. Thank you for watching my tier list. This is Alex Bucky 142. Now please like and subscribe. That really does me a lot of good. And if you disagree, or if you disagree with me, please comment. I accept all criticism or all likes or just all discussions. I want to have a discussion with people. I enjoy talking with people. I also enjoy good debate. So please go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, I'll talk to you guys later. Next up, I don't know what video I'll do next, but it might be a tier list or it might be something totally new and exciting. I'm still new to this whole YouTube thing, so sorry about the quality of this. I know it's pretty rough. I have a cheap microphone here and a crappy computer, but I'm doing what I can. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.